don't want to play cards with me because I'll cheat. Okay? I cheat. You want to play 21?
Space 22.
22. 22! Oh, man!
The number 23, rated R.
Welcome to Roll Credits, a podcast about connections, both in film and in life. I'm Aaron.
I'm Mandy.
Each episode, we aim to explore a cast member, actor, director, or even a concept that ties a set of movies together. We talk about the history and the context of a movie, and have some fun while discussing our own personal opinions.
Let me ask, is there a better way to end a podcast about connections than a movie about connections?
You know, it really is an excellent final choice, and I'm very excited to kind of get into this because, first off, this is an Armbar Studios production. For all information about all of our projects, you can go to armbarstudios.com, and just like you hinted, today's episode is about the number 23, which was released in 2007. It is the end of our Joel Schumacher arc. If you haven't listened yet, we've done St. Elmo's Fire, The Lost Boys, Falling Down, Batman Forever, The Phantom of the Opera, and now the number 23. It is currently October, which is one of our favorite times of the year. We've been watching a lot of horror movies, so that's kind of delayed a little bit of our recording, but, you know, it's fine. I mean, you know, it may not be Friday, but it is October 13th. Oh, no.
Hold on. Now let me get 10, 30. Fuck!
Oh,
Damn it!
10, 13! 10 plus 13, 23!
And we actually watched this on the 23rd of September, too, so it's been a minute.
Yep, and that night I woke up and it was 11:12. Maybe Jim Carrey had a point. For those who don't know, the number 23 is the harrowing tale of a dog catcher named Walter Sparrow, played by Jim Carrey, who becomes obsessed with a mystery novel that seemingly reflects his life, all centered around the prevalence of the number 23.
What was it with the early 2000s and the last name of Sparrow?
Are there multiple examples of this?
Jack?
You know, I didn't even make that connection. Jack and Walter Sparrow separated at birth.
Yeah, it could take place in the same universe. There's nothing saying it.
There's nothing saying that Pirates of the Caribbean isn't happening like in the distant past.
You best believe in the number 23, Jim Carrey.
So, we chose this movie because it was famously divisive upon release, which I will be happy to, you know, talk a little bit about later.
Right.
But it was also, I think, something unusual. And I think, you know, starting and ending with a divisive Joel Schumacher film feels like the right way to honor his legacy. So, do you have any experience with this film before we watched it?
Well, this is our first time watching this movie, both of us.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what I wanted to talk about with you. I mean, I remember very clearly the internet's reaction to this. It was heavily ridiculed by critics and online. Everybody was just saying, like, oh, great, the Batman guy's at it again. Like, that's like always the thing. Like, after Joel had made Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, like, he never lived that down.
Absolutely. It was kind of a combination from what I saw, was a combination of, yes, oh, the Batman guy's at it again, but also, oh, man, Jim Carrey in a serious role, get back to comic acting, which is stupid because this was this...
Eternal Sunshine came first.
Yeah, Eternal Sunshine came first, and he kills it in that. Like, we've talked about Eternal Sunshine enough on every episode we've done, basically.
It's probably too much of an art film for some people, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. But, yeah, basically, I also remember, I have this memory of reading a syndicated review in the newspaper of the time when I was in Italy at the time, and I remember reading kind of an American newspaper that had some syndicated review of the number 23, just trashing it. That's basically my experience with this movie before we decided to watch it.
It's weird. Like, I couldn't give you exact examples. It's been so long. This was literally released back in 2007. I had been on the internet for only about a few years since then, so a lot of it is really blurry. I went to go check a lot of reviews and dig up opinions at the time. Of course, you can play a drinking game with how many times Batman and Robin pops up.
Of course.
But, I think the funniest thing that I found while looking this up was the physics forums, because most of the thread was a discussion on Jim Carrey himself and how good Eternal Sunshine was, and then it got derailed because they all started talking about like numerology.
Hey, listen, the movie had an audience and it was numerologists.
Also, I guess there was like some kind of controversy with this one. Completely untrue, but there was like this rumor that spread that Jim Carrey had actually fired his agent over getting him in this movie. Jim actually had to release a public statement saying that, like, no, that wasn't the case. Like, we just wanted to move on.
Huh. And it's funny because he liked this movie, right? Like, he liked being part of it.
He talks, if there's one person who stands up for this movie, it is Jim. He's very proud of his work on this one.
Understandably so. He's probably, frankly, one of the reasons to see the movie. For all its faults, which, we'll get into, I do think that Jim, you can tell, was clearly putting everything into his role, which, I get it. Again, you wanna spread your wings a bit. Good for him.
So I would love to get into the history of this movie.
Okay.
There's a lot, similar case here. There's a lot more to the production than I really thought there ever was going to be.
Yeah, especially coming off of Phantom of the Opera, going to this movie. That's however many years that is. I'm sure there's a lot to cover.
But funny enough, funny you mentioned Phantom of the Opera. Last episode we talked about that Eric. So before I get into the history, I actually wanted to talk about another Eric.
Okay.
Eric Foreman, the hit main character from for a majority of that 70s show.
Yeah, I was like, that 70s show, Eric Foreman? The guy that my college roommate watched every day?
Yes. So I tried, and I could not find a way to fit this into the story for the biography. But I bring this up because James, our friend, and host of the Teen Titans recap podcast, The Last Slice of Pizza, actually told me about what sounds like an episode of that 70s show where there's a queer character played by a young Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh.
That Eric goes to see Car Wash with him.
Oh.
As science partner. He wanted to bring that up. I looked into this because he mentioned that this might be worth looking into. Even though it doesn't really have a lot of connection here, this is such an odd episode. You read this premise, Eric finds out that his science partner is like a gay person, and it's like, oh no, this is a gay panic episode. Mm-hmm. Probably one of the most common things you hear about the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Now, here was the weird thing to me that I wanted to bring this up. This is as far removed from the podcast, but I think this is just, worth mentioning, getting out into the world. The character was actually written on to be a reoccurring character and a full-on romantic interest for Eric Foreman.
What?
They canceled it because America was complaining because they were too homophobic at the time.
They wanted to give Eric Foreman a boyfriend?
Yes! There's an actual kiss in this episode, and then after that they had to just write this character off because America was just they said no, not now. And then 1 year later of this, sure as Willow comes out on Buffy, and we get that's a massive deal. But
oh my
holy
God.
Hell.
I can genuinely say, listen, I've not seen enough of that 70s show since I was a kid. I cannot say I've seen this episode, but the fact that they go and see Car Wash and that happens, maybe we should have done Car Wash for this arc. Maybe we'll do it on our own for fun. That's crazy.
We'll put it up on the Patreon.
Yeah, definitely. Give us the coffee money or Ko-Fi to do Car Wash.
Anyways, I just wanted to bring that up. shouts to James, huge fan of the podcast, friend of ours.
Yeah, giving us all kinds of great stuff that we had no clue about. So thank you very much, James.
So let's pick up for Joel one last time here. My sources this time include New York Times, Los Angeles Times, The Leader Post, Variety, Just Jared, and Boston.com.
Well, I mean, I think we can trust Just Jared. If Just Jared says it's true.
So Joel continued to direct after Phantom of the Opera, late into his 70s, actually. He had a slew of projects into the 2000s, most of which never really saw the light of day or eventually went to a new team. Several of them were actually adaptations of books or English versions of foreign films, like, for example, the Swedish film Sleepwalker. So there are versions of these movies that exist out here, just, Joel never got a chance to complete his take on them. Mm-hmm. After Phantom of the Opera, we got his final string of feature films, starting with the movie we're actually covering today, The Number 23. And like Phantom, it was a movie that took a while to get off the ground. There's a clipping from the New York Times back in 2002 that shows that Joel had been working on this project since 2002. It eventually released in 2007. So this was a whole 5-year time frame. And funny enough, Jim Carrey, who's kind of like the face of this movie, literally the poster is his face, with a whole bunch of 23 stuff written on it. But, his involvement with the product was shockingly not a call on Schumacher's behalf. Schumacher famously likes to get his friends in on projects, and he had a good relationship with Jim, but the thing is, Carrey was actually legitimately fascinated with the number 23 phenomenon in real life at the time.
Yeah, this is based on a real, numerology thing. It's a bit of a pseudoscience and a bit of a superstition, but it's a thing.
And he talks about this in articles here. He had a whole book full of number 23 phenomena, or his friend did technically. And Jim, he said he was like a skeptic. Then he began noticing connections to 23 in his real life. And it became just an obsession with him. So a few years later, he's handed a book about Psalm 23. That's the one that talks about walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil,
yeah,
for thou art with me.
One of the most famous Psalms. Thank you, Coolio.
So inspired by that, Jim actually changed his studio, Pitbull Productions, to JC23.
Huh.
And Jim was actually talking about his studio and the name change with another one of his friends who mentioned to Jim that there was a script being circulated right now called The Number 23. Now, Jim, 23... freak that he is, immediately seeked this out and talked about how he started reading it and then he was losing it because on page 1, the main character is trying to catch a pit bull.
Yeah, that is a thing that happens, and that's really funny because wow, that's a you want to talk about connections? There you go. And
Jim. Obviously, he walked into it a big 23 enthusiast, but he wasn't the only person who had 23 fever on the set. Schumacher was seemingly the only person on the production team who wasn't feeling chased by the number at the time. Virginia Madsen, who plays the wife, Agatha, she kept running into it. For example, she talked about how the parking space assigned to her shooting was 23. Her mother's new house had 23 in its address. She pointed out that they ended up filming a very key scene for the film on a 32nd Street.
It's fun because I think that the human brain loves to find patterns. And this... If you're already superstitious, this movie does like to get in your brain, which is kind of fun. I can't lie.
I do think that is kind of the eventual point of the film. But, I'm getting way too ahead of myself for this.
Sorry.
It's fine. Her ex-husband, Danny, actually plays Isaac French in the movie. That is the most important side character alongside Agatha. So, funny enough, they would have celebrated a 23-year anniversary during the shooting of the number 23 had they not broken up.
Oh, wow.
It had been 23 years since. Yep. And all of that is minor compared to what was the biggest moment for the crew on the set. Scene 23, take 23, happened while they were filming on February the 23rd.
Oh, my God. It all comes together. It's all connected.
God, that is so cool.
That is cool.
Pardon me, not to be a conspiracy theorist, the episode of the number 23, but I really think that someone's mind palace realized that they could do this, and this would be sick as hell if they did it.
The AD was like, "Oh, buddy, I'm gonna mess with everyone."
You know what? Let's put off this scene for today, but we'll pick it up tomorrow. Just like and then they're like, "You sure? We still got some time left in the day." No. And then just in the back of their mind, they're like, "Oh, these stupid motherfuckers.
This is gonna get him. This is gonna get him." That's funny.
So as for Joel, he is obviously the focal point here. One of the big things Joel did for this movie was he purposely hid the number 23 anywhere that he could, so that when people eventually got the DVD, they could watch again and again, pausing and analyzing the scenes. He points out there's even 23 in Chinese at one point during the scene.
That's cool.
I couldn't tell you exactly where it is. I tried looking it up, but
I'm going to say that while I haven't done any deep research on this, the amount of kind of involvement Joel has had throughout pretty much all of these home video releases really shows me that he was a huge proponent of the format and just of people being able to watch and rewatch and re-experience his movies and really get the full picture. And we are so blessed, that he cared enough about home video releases to give us all this all those years later. Like, thank you, Joel.
How many director commentaries did he film? I think literally Phantom of the Opera was the only one we could find where he didn't really contribute anything.
Exactly. And he still did a bunch of special features, interviews, and the sing-along. So there you go.
So there's one elephant in the room that I just want to bring up with regards to the production of this movie and specifically Jim Carrey. Jim, obviously very famously a method actor. Between this, the production of Fun with Dick and Jane, and a series of unfortunate events, there's a lot of people that agreed that he was in a dark place at the time, and he was freaking out the cast, crewmate, directors. So let me not get around it. There was an improvised moment while shooting where he unzipped his pants and then just took a piss mid-scene.
I didn't even know you could do that. I mean, you shouldn't do that. That's bad. But I didn't know that method acting even, who does that?
Literally, this is the craziest thing I've heard outside of the Jared Leto shit.
Yeah, crazy.
As you can probably expect, people on the set were pretty angry with him at the time.
He got piss on the set. And also, everything else.
Now, past the initial report for the gossip magazine Radar, who initially reported this, as far as I know, Jim nor anyone else has ever cared to comment on this.
Okay.
But just mentioning that here, it's a very odd one.
Yeah, it's an odd bit of gossip.
So, maybe one day this will come out in Jim's memoir. Until then, there's not really much more we can really talk about it. After the 5-year production cycle, the film eventually did release in 2007. In terms of commercial success, it did manage to break even. In terms of critical success, reviews, as you know, were brutal.
Absolutely.
Rotten Tomatoes currently has the film at a whopping 7% fresh. Now, for comparison's sake, Batman and Robin is 12%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I know, percentage isn't always the best indicator on Rotten Tomatoes. Something could be 100% fresh and have an average score of 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
But, I think that just goes to show people generally didn't like this one.
They were not happy with it. Yeah. You got that right. In fact, I have some interesting quotes to dive into.
Now, as we go on to Joel's final string of films, I wish I could tell you that Joel had one final hit before his passing. But unless you count the episodes of House of Cards that he had directed in 2013, that just, wasn't the case here. He made the Henry Cavill starring horror film from 2009, Blood Creek, a 2010 crime movie called 12, which was based on a novel of the same name. And then his final feature film was actually the 2011 crime movie Trespass. So that reunited him with Nicolas Cage and Nicole Kidman, who he worked with on 8mm and Batman Forever, respectively. Also reunited him with the cinematographer Andrzej Bartowiak, who was actually the cinematographer on Falling Down.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of one last sort of reunion, I guess you could say.
That's nice.
For one big feature film. And then after those episodes of House of Cards, he finally stepped away from the world of directing. The last credit to his name was not as a director or writer, but actually an interviewee for the Netflix documentary, Halston. That said, the Vulture interview that I'd been pulling from since the first episode of this arc was posted in August of 2019, and it was one of the last real accounts we have of Joel, as he passed away not even 1 year later, and on June 22nd, 2020, due to cancer during the height of the global pandemic.
I forgot it was so recent.
In the 50 years in Hollywood, he never received any major recognition, no major film awards, no Lifetime Achievement Awards. And I think, maybe if there's one positive takeaway from his death, it's that, we're lucky that Joel had actually lived to be 80. I'm sure he himself thought he would never live to see that day. He talked about how he nearly died from drugs as a kid. And, he was almost certain that he was going to die from AIDS back in the 80s because he was a promiscuous guy. He knew a lot of the first people who died from AIDS. And yet, he managed to have a huge career in Hollywood that lasted 5 decades after breaking free of the world of fashion that he was locked into. And that's pretty incredible.
Absolutely.
What's more remarkable, too, is that for all the spats on the set of Batman Forever, you'd be hard pressed to find someone in Hollywood who had a bad word to say on him. He was just so amiable and grateful to even be this blockbuster Hollywood director. In many ways, it seems like that's just what he wanted to do. He was happy to live his life. And recognition from Hollywood would have been deserved, but a more important indicator of him as a person and as a director, the impact he left on Earth was the sheer number of people sad about his death and what they had to say. So I wanted to get into that today.
Absolutely.
So we talked about Seal in a previous episode, his story about how Batman Forever saved his career. And he talked about it on the day of Joel's passing. There were many more stories that we didn't talk about, all of which will be found online right now, mostly on Twitter and Instagram. Some of them on Facebook. Kiefer Sutherland, Nicole Kidman, Jim Carrey, longtime collaborators with Joel on several of his films we've reviewed, and even more that we didn't, all posted very loving tributes to him on the day of his passing, as did Emmy Rossum, our Christine from the last episode, who specifically mentioned that Joel's passing just reduced her to tears. Speaking of Phantom, Minnie Driver called him the funnest, chicest, most hilarious director that she ever worked with. Andrew Lloyd Webber called Joel his friend, a visual master, and a brilliant talent spotter.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Corey Feldman, who played Edgar Frog in The Lost Boys, wrote a whole Twitter thread on his passing. calling Joel a beautiful soul and told the world that Schumacher would send him supportive messages until the end of his life. Michael Douglas, our defense, went on Instagram to post behind-the-scenes photos of falling down and say that working with Joel on the movie was one of the best film experiences he ever had.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Matthew McConaughey, who worked with Joel in A Time to Kill, a film we didn't review for this, but he did. He had one of the more noteworthy ones. He talked about how Joel actually stepped up to bat for him against the studio when Matthew was still a relative unknown in Hollywood.
It's funny because, Matthew McConaughey is like massive now.
And he, I do think that is the talent spotting side of Joel. Like, you look at him, he was one of the first people to work with the Feldmans, one of the first people to work with Matthew McConaughey. I even think he was one of the first people to really work with Gerard Butler before he really got his start. And obviously
Patrick Wilson, Emmy Rossum, of course,
Colin Farrell.
Yeah.
And to continue on, Kevin Smith, the director and podcaster who later went on to recap the Schumacher cut of Batman Forever that I mentioned on that episode. He never really worked with Joel on a movie, but on his passing, Kevin talked about meeting him on the set of Batman and Robin and talked about just how nice and hospitable he was. Really, though, the one man who seemed to have been hit especially hard that day was Colin Farrell. The now A-list Hollywood actor who credits Joel for discovering him and making him the star of Tigerland and Phone Booth. After Joel's passing, Colin got in touch with Shea Wiggum, who was also from Tigerland. They had actually met up one-on-one while COVID restrictions were still extremely high. Mm-hmm. They were extremely careful about it, but they just needed time to reminisce on Joel. Many years later, though, Colin was actually asked on the subject of Joel and his movies while he was being interviewed for The Batman by Cinnamon Blend. And one thing that he did was he was quick to defend Schumacher's Batman movies and talked about how Joel was a very dear friend to him and how upset he would get watching Joel feel hurt by that movie's reception. Really, though, every testimony spoke about Joel the same way. They called him a kind soul. He was a friend. He was a visionary. And, to many, he's forever just going to be the guy who ruined Batman. But his impact in pop culture has been felt and will continue to be felt every day. And that's something that I don't know if he would have ever predicted.
Yeah.
So let's actually talk a minute before we move on about some of the movies that we've reviewed to this point, because they actually have sort of their epilogues here.
Okay.
Earlier this year, actually, Hulu made a documentary on the Brat Pack, and with it, Variety reported shortly after that released that they are currently in the process of making a sequel to St. Elmo's Fire. All this many years later. I have to see how that'll turn out, but crazy to think. Possibly one of the most hated films of the 80s in some regard. As we're recording this in October, many have and will continue to watch The Lost Boys for the first time or rewatch it again.
In fact, shortly and at the end of this week, we're going to be at a big event where they're going to be showing it on a big old screen outside. And a lot of those people are going to be able to see it for the first time. So that's exciting.
It lives on as an 80s horror classic. I think everybody can agree. Mm-hmm. And although there's no plans to make The Lost Girls, last year, acclaimed theater director Michael Arden of the musical Parade began to work on a musical adaptation of The Lost Boys. Oh. Now, I actually made a comment on that episode that if I had the opportunity to make a Lost Boys musical, I would take it. But, I was unaware at the time. There was a Playbill announcement from December of 2023 about this musical, and the website for this musical is actually already up.
Oh my God. That is incredible. I cannot believe that. We're making moves here. We're on the wavelength.
Oh, trust me, because it can't. You want to talk about how I call something and then you want to talk about how we call something and then it turns out that this already is a thing.
Yeah.
I mentioned that I wanted defense in Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I didn't get that, but it turns out Tony Hawk's American Wasteland actually has a cutscene based on the rocket launcher scene, complete with a model that looks like defense.
Oh my God!
I swear to you, I had no clue of this. I had never played American Wasteland.
Oh my God! I think we got to play American Wasteland.
We'll save that for the video game podcast, I guess. Falling Down did receive 2 Bollywood remakes in the 2000s, but other than that, it remains untouched, and I don't think I would really want like a remake or a sequel.
No.
So
I do want it in the Criterion Collection. I've decided, like, if a single Joel Schumacher movie gets in the Criterion Collection, I kind of want it to be Falling Down.
yes, please. The modern reclaiming of 2004's Phantom is still a work in progress. We're working on it.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're still its only fans.
But the Phantom musical itself did actually end its run on both West End in 2020 and also Broadway in 2023. And as we mentioned last episode, 2011 actually had the Royal Albert Hall recording of Phantom.
Mm-hmm.
Which is said to be now the definitive version of Phantom of the Opera, but it does allow the 2004 Phantom film to exist as a curiosity and another one of the many versions of Phantom of the Opera you can watch out there.
It's October. Watch as many as you can.
Absolutely. This would be like a great time to just watch the Universal monsters as they were. There was a 1940s Universal version of Phantom of the Opera, and then maybe also look at the remakes of it in a sense, or the later versions of it. I just think that would be a fun idea.
It's the 50th anniversary of Phantom of the Paradise.
Love that one too. We got to get to that one eventually. And finally, let's talk about Joel's arch nemesis, the Big Bad Bat. Batman Forever actually received a worldwide re-release in theaters on the 21st of September, which saw many new eyes and old eyes watching the film for the first time and reappraising the film. Now, my lovely co-host has actually brought it to my attention that in between me originally writing this and also the recording this podcast, the new Joker movie has released, and it has lower critical approval on it than Batman Forever on Rotten Tomatoes. So you know what? We're getting there.
No longer the bad Batman movies.
And no update since last time on the Schumacher cut itself. I will put an aside for this podcast the day we finally get more definitive info. Until then, I'm just going to encourage everyone, continue following the hashtag. Thank you, Joel. I'm looking forward to finally reviewing this last movie, and then we can move on to our next arc.
Absolutely. So, Joel, thank you for everything. It has been a wonderful arc, and I'm really excited to kind of dive deeper into the number 23, a unique film, and really what a great way to go out. Not necessarily because the film was incredible or anything, but I don't know. I think he would have appreciated us choosing such an unusual choice for our finale. So that was beautiful.
Thank you.
He really will be missed, but I'm very happy that he is being finally appreciated as he should, as a queer visionary that deserves the world. Now, shall we go into some uglier topics as we discuss the reviews and the physical release of this film?
Is the physical release ugly too?
Oh no, the physical release is great.
So we're just going to be talking shit about the reviewers.
Yeah, we're gonna clown on these reviewers.
I know there's at least one surprise here.
Yes,
I'm looking forward to you bringing that up. But,
okay,
get right into it.
Let's get to this. Let's get physical. So the original DVD released in 2007, and it was actually the final release to feature New Line Home Entertainment's Infinifilm label. So much like Twister is the first movie ever released on DVD, we got ourselves a milestone here with the number 23, the last of the Infinifilm label that everyone remembers and knows what I'm talking about.
We've all been here.
Yeah, so the Blu-ray released in 2009, so it's an early Blu-ray, as most of his films were, because it's really interesting looking at early Blu-ray and, from your Talladega Nights to everything in between and just seeing what they did. Now, we don't own this Blu-ray. I can't tell you if it immediately boots up like the rest, but I would assume that they're very similar. But here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to quote some impressions from 2009 of the Blu-ray from Blu-ray.com's Jeffrey Kaufman. The number 23 Blu-ray delivers great video and superb audio in this enjoyable Blu-ray release. He praises the color and the depth of the novel sequences, which were some of the most visually stunning sequences in the film that we very much enjoyed. He says the audio is immersive with excellent fidelity, and it really underscores the tension. Great clear dialogue, visceral low end is what he says. There is a theatrical cut, which is an hour and 38 minutes, which is the version that we watched, and an unrated cut, which is an hour and 41 minutes, presented via seamless branching on this Blu-ray. So basically you can pick and you can choose either theatrical or unrated, and it'll insert the unrated scenes in the scenes that they were cut from the theatrical. So basically the unrated cut, all it really has is longer sex scenes and extended murder scenes. And
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. Sex and murder. Love it. Great stuff.
Joel was like, I'm going to give you one last treat for your final episode.
Yeah, they were like, listen, I couldn't do the sex scenes in the last one, but buddy, whoo boy. Thank you, Joel. So yeah, the other extras are also all in high definition. So again, Joel really lent himself to this physical release with a commentary over the theatrical cut. And also this interesting feature called Focus Points, which seems to be branching featurettes. Like when you're watching the movie, a gold disc icon will appear and you can select it to get like a little featurette breaking down something happening in the scene.
Oh, that rules.
Isn't that great? What a man.
We need to bring back like the video gamification
for real.
Of this stuff. Like I will never respect Netflix until they give me like a small icon in the corner.
Yeah, give me Focus Points. Give me the Speed Racer Blu-ray video game, that DVD game. Apparently these are according to Kaufman very interesting. The best ones focus on the best ones are focusing on the cinematography and visual effects. There's also very similarly something called Fact Track, which, do you know VH1's pop-up video?
Absolutely.
Imagine that, but for the movie.
I was just about to say, I would love to see that make a comeback. So I'm so happy.
I loved pop-up video growing up, so that's cool as hell to me. But the things you can kind of understand are things like principal photography started on January 23rd, 2006. Ooh. And there's also a 22-minute documentary called The Making of the Number 23. And also Creating the World of Fingerling, which is like a cinematography and effects reel that's about 11 minutes long. And also How to Do Your Numbers, a brief introduction to numerology, focusing on adding up all the numerals of your birth month, day, and year to arrive at your principal number, which is like a fully like subsectioned out like study of numerology. And there's 14 and a half minutes of deleted and alternate scenes.
Only 14?
And also, only 14. And also there's another thing about the number 23, about the actual phenomenon, a 25-minute documentary.
Joel, I'm sorry.
I know, man.
I
you
can't
tried.
get over this. You should have filmed some extra scenes just to cut them.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, the number 23 Enigma. So if you are a fan of the number 23, once again, an incredible Blu-ray release. I don't think anything has topped, none of these have topped Batman Forever. However, every single one of these has tons of features, tons of featurettes, like interesting, tons of facts about these movies. So if you're a fan of any of these Joel Schumacher movies, like, again, why don't all physical releases get this care? This is the kind of stuff I'm looking for. You're getting the movie in great quality and you're getting a ton of extra stuff. Like, man, isn't that cool? So yeah, that's great. Less great. We're going to move on to the reviews.
Woo!
However, you are, let's see, absolutely right, because there are some interesting surprises here, including something I misremembered. In my head, I thought that Roger Ebert had a review where he hated the movie. I don't think he ever reviewed it. However, this was reviewed on Ebert and Roper.
Yep.
This was during a time where Ebert could not make it, so it was actually Richard Roper and George Pannacchio of KABC TV.
Weirdly enough, this was one of the first episodes I remember watching.
Yeah.
Because I think they had just put up the website at the time, so they were dropping like whole episodes on the website as soon as it came on, and the number 23 was one of the first ones. So tell me about it, because I remember and what they felt about it.
Well, what's really absolutely fascinating, one, I tried to find this episode. I cannot find it anymore. Trust me, I dug. And unfortunately, the Internet Archive is down, so if it's there, it's not there. Yeah, I could not find evidence of this, but at least in video form. But I did find plenty of like text reviews, none of which kind of said what they said. But they gave it 2 thumbs up. And they're like the only critics who gave this 2 thumbs up. However, Michael Phillips, on a later episode when they released the Worst of 2007 show, filled in for Ebert and put it on his Worst of 2007 list. Roper did not. So that's interesting. In fact, he rated it number 7 of the worst films of 2007. So, no, 3 times 7 is 21. I did the math.
Damn it.
I know. However, it was also nominated for 2 Teen Choice Awards. Carrie was also nominated for the Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actor, which is bullshit. I mean, we have our own issues with the Razzies, but that's ridiculous. He was like, again, you really kind of get this picture of how unfair and how kind of mean-spirited the Razzies can be, and like they are not to be taken seriously.
Not to beat this like a dead horse, you get the feeling that it's kind of like an ex, where it's like once you break up with this person, once they've done something that makes it so that you don't like it, suddenly like every single thing that they do, like you have to be like the biggest fucking critic of it. Yeah,
it's ridiculous. And however, he did not win that Razzie. That went to Eddie Murphy and Norbit. It's October.
Yeah, that's deserved.
Yeah, it's October, so don't worry, you did not just break No Norbit November.
Thank God.
Let's see. From the Bowling Green Daily News, Michael Compton says, I don't need 23 words to sum up my feelings for the new Jim Carrey film, The Number 23. I can sum it up in 2.5. It's terrible. It takes a decent premise and turns it into utter trash. Bob Grimm of the Reno News liked it, but I tried clicking the review and it was a 404 page. And so Ken Hankey of the Mountain Express, which is Asheville, North Carolina's newspaper, and this was unexpected. Pray for the people of Asheville, donate, help them out after that horrible hurricane. But yeah, this was an of the time Asheville review from the Mountain Express. The sad thing is I wanted to like The Number 23. I've been in the process of reassessing Schumacher's work and have generally found it to be better than I'd originally thought. Bad Company 2002 is still bad, and the less said about his Batman outings, the better. But there's more to his design-conscious operatic style than is often assumed. For that matter, what's wrong with The Number 23 can't be blamed on Schumacher. Schumacher gamely tries to make something out of the amassed inanity of the screenplay by newcomer Fernley Phillips, and he has managed to pull together a beautifully designed, terrific-looking movie that often makes brilliant use of color. But what he has not done, what I don't think anyone can do, is make the number 23 anything other than preposterously silly. That is a fair negative review. I think we will go into it. I have my things where I think the silliness is fun. That's enjoyable. But I do think that this movie's issues are not Schumacher.
No, I would love to get into that myself. I'll make sure that we talk about that in the wrap-ups. But like the weird part is, I think I agree with a lot of what he's saying.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the contemporary kind of feeling at the time. And so, what did we think of it? Do you want to get into the movie itself?
Absolutely. Let's jump right in.
Okay.
So.
Cool intro, by the way, like for the movie. I'm not going to go beat by beat. I'm not going to go plot by plot, but I just want to say, visually, I agree. So.
Oh yeah, like the opening is a full typewriter with 23 typed all over it. There's a lot of blood spilled on it.
Like pages from history books of like highlighting kind of conspiracies about the number 23.
Numerology and everything. It was like kind of a genuinely upsetting sort of opening.
Yeah, it was really cool. And also, we get the credits, which had me personally popping off because the music was by Harry Gregson Williams. And I was like, I recognize that name. And then immediately it clicked. He is the one who made the score. I recognize him from Metal Gear Solid 4. And he also composed for 2 and 3 and V.
Hell yes.
So okay. Harry Gregson Williams of the Metal Gear Solid series did the music for the number 23.
Do you think we could convince Hideo Kojima to watch this movie if he hasn't already?
I feel like this feels like a movie he's already watched.
You know what? Yeah. Like I don't know why I even had like a single doubt in it. Like he probably owns this movie.
He has the Blu-ray and he does every time he watches it, he presses the button when the gold disc appears in the corner. Going, very interesting.
We're not going to know about this until eventually he makes Death Stranding 23, in which case he's going to include a really subtle reference.
Absolutely. Do it for us. Cast Jim in his wet, sad boy Walter Sparrow outfit.
So obviously this was based on a real popular rumor, conspiracy, similar to 2012, similar to how I guess Candyman was fictional, but it was based on Bloody Mary.
Yeah.
Or even that new Elevator Game movie that released within the last year.
Oh, yeah.
Like all of that stuff was based on these rumors and stories.
Urban legends are really great fodder for thrillers, mysteries. You know, on one hand, sometimes you can get the Da Vinci Code or you can get Ancient Aliens of just stuff that has like, that's just kind of garbo, nonsense. But I think this is fun. I think there's something fun that you can do by seeing the number 23 in all these different contexts.
And that's why, even though at the time, when I first was told of this movie, I was like, in the back of my head, my young brain was like, that's stupid. I didn't realize that this was like based on a real thing. I think they maybe should have talked about that a little more.
Clearly they dive into it a lot in that. Like there are scenes in the movie where they kind of mention it, but I think that people would be forgiven for not realizing that this was a thing. It's sort of like, very comparable to kind of the Ancient Aliens thing, Eternals is based on it as well. It was like a book, like Pyramid of the Gods or whatever it was called. But, it's
Stargate even did that.
Yeah, exactly. There are all these kinds of conspiracies and all these things where I think a lot of people don't realize, like, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a bunch of people who think, oh, the number 23, that's random. That must have been invented by the movie. Or Ancient Aliens, that must have been invented by History Channel. Like, that's their only frame of reference. Instead of kind of diving into kind of the longer history of these conspiracy theories, which, are, I'm not recommending you do that. But I'm just saying that it's understandable that if you were unaware of the number 23 phenomenon, that you would just kind of find it to be arbitrary and silly. And it is arbitrary and silly, but again, it's, I don't know, in this one particular case, it's a little harmless.
This is probably the most justified they ever kind of did this, because it's not just so simple, I'd say.
Absolutely.
And also, I think they heavily like the specific use of it in this case is for like an obviously fictionalized scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, the movie, once we're finally past the intro that gives us all of the conspiracy details, we see a journal entry by Jim Carrey's character, the aforementioned Walter Sparrow. And do you remember the date?
Was it, oh goodness, I think I do. It was February 23rd?
February 3rd.
Oh, February 3rd.
3.
Yes.
And Walter Sparrow, he is just an animal control guy.
Yeah. He's a dog catcher.
A dog catcher. And he, as far as I could tell, he was really the only known actor in this cast, at least as far as like name marquee value type people.
Right.
You'll find a lot of people who have these smaller parts, but Jim is the star. If you look at the poster, he's the only one with his name on it.
Mm-hmm.
There, for a moment though, there was a guy who does look a little like Mark Ruffalo. It is not Mark Ruffalo.
Okay, fair enough.
Before we get after the journal entry, there is a flashback all the way to December 23rd.
Yeah, it's a secret Christmas movie.
Yes. They do this in like this 2000 movie way. Where they're like, stop, that's me. Well, you're probably wondering how I wound up here.
Yeah.
Well, it's a long story.
Jim is a weirdo in this movie.
Yeah, you immediately get kind of an uncomfortable vibe from him. Not to mention, like, as soon as you see like his house, it is so fucking basic. And like to some extent, I think they did mention that they were moving in, but at the same time, you see the house many months later, still kind of barren.
Oh yeah, no, that was always something that fascinated me about this, because this is something super cool. We've talked a lot about how Joel is an expert in production design, and even in this very movie, he has put the number 23 in like all these different contexts and all these different secrets, and there were a few that I was picking up, and it was fun. It was a little bit of a game, but the one thing that he knows how to do is make a character's living space reflect them. And that is your first hint that something's going wrong here, which, you know, that something is not quite right, because rather than the densely kind of populated areas that, you know, Joel's normally known for, we got like the IKEA special. We got the beige walls and or like, I don't know, they were some neutral color kind of thing, except we do get the hint that the wife did choose out the red parts of the house, but very basic, you cannot really get a sense of who this family is just from the location, which is very unusual for Joel.
And it is just the house too.
Yeah.
Because they go to many places outside of this house.
They even have a Christmas party at the house that is much more interesting than how the house normally is.
Well, there was also like the kind of work Christmas party where they had like bitches.
Oh, the bitches bathroom
over like the
female
side.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. That was a work Christmas party. But yes, that is the bitches bathroom, which not politically correct, mildly amusing. In terms of how audacious that was.
It was written. The whole point is it's written on cardboard. It was clearly kind of glued on or taped on.
And the Christmas party
it's
itself,
meant to be like a whole bunch of drunk people are doing stupid things to make themselves
absolutely
happy.
And the Christmas party itself, again, it really is such a cool contrast to Walter's house, because of how lively it is. So a real Joel special there. And I think that's the entire point, is that it's really showing you a lot of visual information that is cool. It's a lot of fun. It's visually, this film is a lot of fun.
So you can cut this out. I just have to ask, are we allowed to say bitches on iTunes?
We can say bitches on iTunes.
Thank God.
You said fucking earlier.
Oh. Moving on. So we get to the scene that Jim had mentioned reading, where he goes to try and catch the pit bull.
He's a big floppy boy.
It's a little unsettling.
Yeah.
He's
kind of a Cujo dog.
I don't even think the dog. I think I was more unsettled by. I was more scared of Jim here.
Oh yeah, it's like, dude, what are you doing?
He seems to have his own sort of techniques, but you mentioned that he is a weirdo. Like
he's so
they do
sad.
a lot to kind of make it come across. There's parts in the house that makes you think that he is kind of, you think maybe he's just sort of like an old guy. Maybe he is somebody who is a little like old fashioned and kind of maybe a little stupid. But then you see how he acts towards the animals. There's a lot that feels like it's missing with him, I'd say.
Absolutely. Like, it's like he's like someone who's trying to pretend to be normal. He's trying to pretend to be your everyman dog catcher, but everything around him is so cold and kind of miserable.
And there's a lot to tell this story within the actual visuals of the film. We talked about how previous Joel films, it's a lot of indicators. One thing you'll notice if you watch like a whole bunch of Joel movies and then this one, there's a lot of huge wide shots with other Joel movies. This one is mostly a lot of repeated shots, a lot of zoomed in shots. The closest Joel film I can really remember that feels this claustrophobic is probably 8mm.
Right, which is also a thriller that you've watched. So that's that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's always interesting to look at when a director goes outside of their style. What did you think about the opening scene of this movie? We've talked about opening scenes with every movie. Do you have any impression of the opening scene?
So that's the one where we're kind of just dropped directly in with the diary, right?
Yeah.
So it felt a little strange, I'd say.
It's a very uncanny kind of way to start the movie.
There wasn't. You look at how many panning shots, though, that Joel has done. It kind of feels like this is sort of his trademark style by this point. That's the one that kind of like constant here. Is it's still, we get kind of a shot to kind of bring us to the scene instead of just like immediately focusing on it. And other than that, everything else just feels, you're right, like off, uncanny.
Yeah.
But like he's sitting in his car, he's writing in a journal, and it's there's like a narration by Jim. He doesn't, if you have an idea of how Jim Carrey sounds like, this is not it. This is like interview voice Jim Carrey.
Yeah. He's doing his real seriousness, and he doesn't have, to compare it to his other big serious role of the time, Eternal Sunshine, that he has kind of this like real sad sort of slow way of doing these things. There's a bit of Eternal Sunshine in that, just because that is how serious Jim Carrey is.
But it's a little more angry.
Yeah, there's a real bubbling sort of frustration in his voice that really works. So I want to talk a little bit. This is very silly, just a very silly detail that I wouldn't have otherwise noticed. So, as an aside, we have a Roku that we watch a lot of things on, and they love to drop sort of sponsored content on the main menu. And at the time, they were advertising Agatha All Along, the new Disney Plus show, which some people seem to very much like. I don't think we'll be watching it. No offense to Agatha All Along and the MCU. But Agatha, his wife, has a cake shop called Agatha's Cake Shop, and it has the same font, like, logo. Did Disney Plus steal Agatha All Along's logo from the number 23?
This is one of those, if a tree falls in the wood type scenarios. Like,
they're like, no one's going to go check the number 23. I bet we can take this. Oh, but
they
y'all
look up like Agatha logos. But somehow, like the one number 23 fan, one of 23, had decided that I'm going to go ahead and just upload this logo because I love this movie. Disney's like, oh shit!
Only 23 people saw this movie. We can take it.
Yeah, fuck it. We who cares?
If the number 23 has 23 fans, assume that I am one of them. If the number 23 has no fans, then I have died.
This film didn't even have 23 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Everything we're talking about here is still within like the opening and the
this
flashbacks.
is all kind of set up.
But this is like sort of a very important scene. How we get to him in the modern day. Well, you'll see why we have the flashbacks because after he fails to catch the dog by chasing it to a graveyard with a gun, which
they gave Jim Carrey a gun.
Okay, to be fair, I don't know.
It's a tranquilizer.
There's a reveal later. I don't know if it was meant to be like a spoiler that it was a tranquilizer gun, but like my immediate thought was that it was just a real gun that they were going to do. I was like, are they allowed to do this to dogs?
Yeah, doesthedogdie.com sweating nervously right now.
And that's when, after meeting up with his wife in a bookshop, she finds a book.
At a bookstore called A Novel Fate, by the way.
Yes.
Which is located at 599, which, if you add up those numbers, is the number 23.
Oh! But yeah.
And now there's a book called The Number 23.
And yes, the number 23 book is written by Top Secrets. Now, Aaron, I don't mean to call you out here. How long did it take you to realize that Top Secrets was like the joke here? Because I realized it within the first 3 seconds because I realized that Top C wasn't a name.
I just thought it was a really silly name. I wrote down, Top Secrets. That's a silly name. I think I only realized it like right before the big reveal where they say it out loud in the movie.
Everybody has their Louis Cypher moments. Everybody has their
Batman versus Alucard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now there was also Batman versus Alucard.
Well, it's Batman versus Dracula, but Dracula in it is called Alucard.
Okay.
And that is revealed by him writing Dracula in a mirror, and it like somehow the mirror reflecting Alucard, which is not how this physically works.
What the fuck? They pull a troll too?
They pull a troll too.
That is hilarious. We got to review this for the podcast.
Absolutely.
I don't know how I think I've watched this movie, but I don't even remember that scene.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say that like there was also like I can't fault you too deeply because I'm pretty sure that I was guilty of this. I've had these moments before, so I do get it. It was just like a little funny.
It was pretty funny
when you like turned around to me and then just said like, "Oh my God, top secrets." I'm like,
yeah.
And then I just like I sort of was just like sitting there kind of quietly. I didn't exactly know how to respond. No, I love you, darling.
Listen, I'm allowed a stupid moment. I can't be incisive all the time.
So, we were talking about how Jim is a weirdo, but at the same time, I'm going to say that he played everything so differently from anything else that we've seen him in. He's a very brooding sort of character.
Yes. Very, very good way of putting that.
The only place you'll ever see him this creepy is in the movie The Cable Guy. And, arguably, he's more unsettling in this. There's not anything that's meant to be funny or like dark humor like The Cable Guy.
Mm-hmm.
None of this feels like a Joel Schumacher specific story until we get to the point where Jim Carrey's character reads from the number 23 for the first time. The number 23, it is a detective noir story.
Yes. And this is frankly, the coolest part of the movie.
Yes.
Parts.
So when he is reading the story, we actually jump directly into the book. It's kind of, I guess you could call it Winnie the Pooh style. Where like the camera goes directly into the visuals for it.
And it looks incredible.
The illustrations.
Like, it looks really cool. There's like this whole thing with like cutouts and paper craft as it kind of goes deeper and deeper into the main character who asks to be called Fingerling, his kind of backstory, right? And his childhood.
And the things he's interacting with are the only things in the book that moves. Everything else is just completely still.
Yeah, there's stuff that's blurry. There's stuff that's sort of static. And it's really, really cool because this whole thing kind of leads into what is one of the really cool kind of plot threads that really did hook me for a bit, which is I actually really do love Jim Carrey's character, like, Walter reading this book and thinking, man, this is just like me for real. And just seeing all these patterns where there aren't really any. Maybe. and sort of trying really hard. He's like, oh, Fingerling, I had a book called Fingerling Goes to the Zoo or whatever it was called, man, this is just like my childhood, even though it's nothing like my childhood. But like, I had a childhood incident that made me want to be a dog catcher, just like this guy had a childhood incident that made him want to be the kid detective. Shoutouts to the Kid Detective.
Shoutouts to the Kid Detective.
Very unique movie. But, it's just that kind of thing where he's like trying really hard to put this stuff together. And I've always kind of loved that. I think a lot about James Rolfe, the AVGN, and how he had a college roommate that watched The Big Lebowski and decided to become the dude in real life. And like, people who watch, Ryan Gosling movies and become, the whole literally me joke with Drive.
I think there is kind of a kinship you have with whatever your favorite character is.
Absolutely.
Some people will go overboard with it.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch too many mobster movies, sometimes you'll give yourself like an Italian accent.
Hey, ma, I gotta go hit the Drapini over here.
But at the same time, like I do feel like if you see any part of you in like a specific character or a story, then yeah, you are going to have that same connection.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Is the cool thing is that, I have characters that I see a lot of myself in, and I use that as something of a kind of a sense of self-reflection. And sometimes it's just kind of fun to like identify. And that's kind of the thing that I was really interested about in this story, that Jim is sort of, Walter's very deeply unsatisfied with his life. He has this kind of his boring house except for his blood red walls, and he loves his family, but he kind of has a dog catcher job that is supposed to be his big passion, but is also kind of also losing its luster because he spends his days fighting pit bulls and wielding a gun. And so he finally has this book that's really, his wife is like, hey, you should read this book. It's pretty cool. And he gets it and he gets super into it. I will criticize the book itself. Like, this is so fucking silly, man. It really does look typewritten. Like, how did it end up in that? I guess, okay.
Yeah, you ever see those, like, it's like when you see the movie version of a newspaper that, like, is fucking stupid as hell. Like, this can't exist in real life. I get it.
Yeah. But at the same time, we did find that Mission Impossible 2 bootleg DVD at the Goodwill. So, maybe I'm just overthinking it. But yeah, it is a really interesting kind of plot thread of how, Walter is kind of disappearing into this book to find this satisfaction and this purpose in life where he kind of has none. And I think that's something that we can all relate to some extent, of getting really into a hobby for a bit.
I have to wonder if maybe Zack Snyder was influenced with like the dual narrative aspects of this, because obviously, Watchmen has this. It's not in the theatrical version, but the uncut version does have what the comic did, which is you get the real story and then Tales of the Black Freighter. Also, like, I think after that, we got Sucker Punch.
Mm.
And obviously, Sucker Punch has that same disconnect between the reality scenes and then the fantasy scenes.
And the fantasy scenes are, shot very differently from the reality scenes in this movie. There's a scene where he's reading a passage about the suicide blonde, who is, the detective goes to some apartment and there's someone he calls a suicide blonde because she's blonde and was about to commit suicide. This isn't the deepest script for as much as it tries. But it's a really beautifully shot scene where Jim is like doing this really great noir narration, and her whole apartment is like covered in white and kind of glowing.
By the way, like around this time, they used the song "She Wants Revenge" by Tear You Apart. I just fucking like freaked my shit because I knew this song.
Yeah,
I didn't even know like where this came from. Like, I just remember, I swear it was all over the playlists at the time in maybe like 2015, 2016. So Joel might have had foresight there, or maybe it was just like a more popular song than I was aware of. But threw me for a loop.
Oh no, trust me. I've mentioned my story in multiple forms of how I went to see Drive in the movie theaters and Night Call hit. And this was when I knew the Kavinsky EP it was from, and I just was like flipping my entire shit in the movie theater. And this was before his album, or he was even kind of a known name. So I think it's very funny when a song you're not expecting shows up in a movie.
And that was so you were mentioning the Suicide Blonde. Her apartment is the one that's all covered in pages.
Yes, and it's glowing white and it looks incredible.
News, and that's because like newspaper.
Yes,
is basically all around this area. Did you notice what chapter I Met the Suicide Blonde was?
No, is it 2?
5.
5, 2 and 3.
Well, yeah, and that was, I think, the first.
I think that's the
first like sort of obvious hint beyond like the few kind of like hints, the small background stuff, because with the Suicide Blonde's apartment, this is where we get the reveal that she talks about how she's haunted by the number 23.
The number 23, yeah, it's her conspiracy board. It's not just glowing white walls. It's newspaper, it's papers, it's notes, and yeah, it's pretty cool. It is a really effective scene that sets up kind of the central conceit of this entire mystery, and I like it. Like, I genuinely like it, and I think a lot of that has to do with that the direction is great, the narration is great, it is a convincingly interesting scene.
So there's a lot about this movie that, from the outside, if you were just reading the script, I think doesn't exactly work. That's one thing that I think he's right on. The script itself just unfortunately has it falls short in many ways, but you can tell exactly why people would want to be involved in this. And it's not just like conspiracy movies, Da Vinci Code and all that. Like, if you're Jim Carrey, right, in this movie, you get to play kind of the timid person, and then you get to play the big noir detective action star.
And he does a really cool job at both, a really unique job.
It really makes you think that Jim Carrey, in many ways, got typecast into sort of his positions. And this movie and Eternal Sunshine really do show what more he could do.
Yeah. And there are always going to be people who see Jim Carrey and they're like, oh, well, that's Jim Carrey. And I get it. You know, I have actors that I find difficult to kind of separate from previous roles. But you need to allow yourself the chance to do that. And I think a lot of people were really being unfair to Jim at this time because they categorized it as like a midlife crisis or something. I mean, yes, we talked about how he was kind of in a darker place, but the dude was trying to do something different. Like, not everyone wants to be the same type of creator for their whole damn life. You know, they're not clowns set to juggle on a unicycle for you. You know, say the line, Bart, you know?
I think it's one of those problems in Hollywood in which if an actor isn't succeeding at what they're doing, they're told you need to go back to the basics. You need to do what brought you into the game in the first place. Not try new things and try and figure out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that maybe that was the big disconnect here is Jim was trying everything and everybody else just wanted him to go back to Mr. Dumb and Dumber, Mr. Ace Ventura.
Yeah.
In that regard, you know, our last arc was Chris Farley. Chris would have probably hated it around this time frame, huh?
Yeah.
But, you know, I think I just have to ask, because do you think this movie might have come a little too late? Do you think they would have been a little more receptive had this been released like early 2000s when this had first been announced?
That's a great question. I think that the movie would have been seen as pretty silly no matter what. But coming off the heels of like Seven and 13 Ghosts. Yeah, and 13 Ghosts, where Mr. Monk says the F word. I think that it probably still would have received some negative reviews, but I do think that people would have been softer on it. Because it was kind of the style of the time. Whereas 07 is sort of a weird transitional time.
Well, you have to think we are literally 1 year away from the start of the MCU.
Yeah, Iron Man. Yep, you are absolutely right. And Dark Knight as well. You know, a very weird transitional time period right now. And I think it did just kind of seem like, I guess, the last gasp for everyone involved and for the style of film it wanted to be. No, absolutely. It's funny because, you know, you mentioned the Da Vinci Code. I mentioned the Da Vinci Code. I mean, that novel was pretty big. No, oh God, no. Even that would have been starting to kind of show its age as well. The Dan Brown thriller, because that was 2005, 2004,
2006.
Okay, 2006. So not as different as I thought it would be, but still, you know, I don't know. Da Vinci Code fever happened, and that's also a book. You can forgive a book.
At the time, Da Vinci Code was when the movie came out. The novel was already out for about 3 years, and people were kind of over it.
Yeah, exactly. Honest. Yeah, like Da Vinci Code had its stay in the spotlight. By the time Dan Brown revealed the third Robert Landon book, like that, his time had passed, you know?
I can't believe we're referencing another Kiva Goldsman movie.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah, he did Da Vinci Code.
That's crazy. Well, there you go. And so, you know, I do think that this movie just came out a little too late to... I do think that it was kind of it just came at the tail end of a lot of different trends and it sort of embodied the worst of them with, unfortunately, a very flimsy script.
Yeah, like, it feels like any faults in this were ones that were going to be immediately attacked.
Yeah, exactly.
This was one of those movies that had to have been classic, I think. It was going to be harder for this to work as like a cult classic at about this point.
Yeah. It needed to either have a really, really, really good script, which it did not, or come out during a time where people were more willing to just take it. And instead it kind of was dropped into some shark-infested waters.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, spoiler alert, I don't think we love this movie.
No.
But it is so interesting to me to think about what this movie does and why it works and why it doesn't.
And what it could have been. So, after that, just in case there was any doubt that 5 was meant to be kind of a connection to 23, Chapter 5, we do get a shot of the cash register after Jim Carrey's character purchases something. It says 2305.
I admit I love all these silly little 23 numbers.
And this is where he pulls out all of the 23 connections on his own life here. This was actually a really cool scene. He gets into, I think, probably some of Jim Carrey's own personal ones that he had. Some of the stuff that he calls out in interviews. It's hard to tell which came first, chicken or the egg, but I do think that he probably had stuff to contribute here. And then also he gets other people into it. He gets his son into it, who I think this is the first time they reveal his name is Robin Sparrow.
Yeah, there's a lot of bird motifs here because we have Walter Sparrow, we have Robin, and there's a Mr. Phoenix as
Dr.
well.
Phoenix.
Or Dr. Phoenix. So yeah, lots of bird motifs in this script. Also, his son being named Robin is funny. Shout out to Batman.
So after making all these connections, Jim starts to show some cracks here. One thing that his wife notices while Jim's character is sleeping, probably one of the creepiest scenes because it's not outwardly pointed out, but it's one of those things that you can't take your eye off of. He has "kill her" written on his fucking arm.
Creepy.
So his wife, panics and then calls Dr. Phoenix, the character that you had mentioned.
Yes. So Dr. Phoenix's study is, we've talked about kind of Joel's very clear motifs that he loves. And in the study, we get things like angels and stained glass and statues and, dusty wooden shelves and books. Just things that we have learned that Joel really loves to highlight in his movies. And it's just very funny to kind of be here in a place where we get a lot of Joel-isms. And speaking of Joel-isms...
Yes. There are far too few films where the main character plays a saxophone. Joel has 3 characters with saxophones that in all major scenes. St. Elmo's Fire, The Lost Boys, and the number 23. What the fuck is the deal with Joel and saxophones?
I think he just likes bad boys with saxophones, because you have Rob Lowe, who is a motorcyclist who plays the saxophone. You have saxophone guy from The Lost Boys in The Big Party, who is awesome on the boardwalk. And now you have him, not a fingerling in the mystery novel. Saxophonist extraordinaire. Great stuff, Joel. Love it. He doesn't actually play the saxophone. He just holds it. Joel was just like, this isn't plot relevant. He's playing the saxophone.
Look, I like your script. But you mentioned here that he has a guitar. Can I change it to a saxophone?
Yeah.
A saxophone, Joel? Are you sure? Yeah. A saxophone, I think that gives it more of a bad boy vibe. What?
Joel Schumacher absolutely loving his bad boys with saxophones. Listen, if this was a Joel call, let the man have his fun.
And if this wasn't a Joel call, it is probably the funniest motif that we have. And it somehow made it into 3 of the movies that we reviewed.
Absolutely incredible stuff. The saxophone trilogy.
If there's one thing I'm glad we caught here, maybe we didn't do the phone booth, but we got to do the original Joel special, the saxophone trilogy.
Thank goodness.
So he's wrapping himself up in this mystery that he created by reading this book and then getting too far into it, trying to figure out, well, why is the number 23 getting to me? It's 11:12 on the clock. Like the audience is seeing exactly the kinds of stuff that he is at this point.
Yeah, there's a really cool scene with another Joel Schumacher special of a lot of slow fades of where he's like looking at different street signs and like he sees like 23rd Street and there's a storefront with 23 and it's like fading between all these different 23s and there's like graffiti that says 23. You know, he's just noticing all of these 2s and 3s and 5s and all of these things. And it's campy, but it's fun. It's fun. And you really kind of get kind of this bubbling paranoia, you know, out of all of this.
And in the middle of all of this, he has a nightmare. It's not immediately revealed as a nightmare, but we see that he kills his wife and then he wakes up. You know, maybe a little bit of an overused cliche. It did get me. Definitely, it's probably one of the weaker elements, I think, but has an important plot relevance. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty cool. And I like where it leads, which is him looking around for these connections between reality and this book, which is a pretty interesting little plot. Like, he has this nightmare. It wakes him up. It's super late at night. It's 11:12. That's kind of a fun thing. He turns around and it is actually 11:12 like it was in the dream. And that only kind of furthers his paranoia for him to just get the hell out of the house.
And this gets him to finish the book where he reads that the main character, Fingerling, gets to this one hotel.
Yes.
He stands over a balcony, and we get to, as he finishes chapter 22, he goes to check on the next chapter. It is blank.
Yes. There is no chapter 23 in this book. The hotel, by the way, is called the King Edward Hotel. And Jim goes and finds the King Edward Hotel, but the sign is burnt out, so it says King Edward Hell. Just a fun little bit. It's kind of like Death Spa, from the movie Death Spa. Gags like that always get me. So he goes to room 23 because of course he does. And another thing that I kind of liked about this room is that the wallpaper resembles the cover of the book. I think it's just a really cute detail.
Yeah.
That's kind of the fun thing about when we're talking about the production design of this movie is how many patterns you can pull out, not just from the numbers, but just from the visual significance of how things look like other things. I just think it's neat. It's a neat little thing. I have a note that just says Silent Hill 2 dog ending.
Oh yeah. So here's the thing. We get a whole bunch of scenes where Jim Carrey is being haunted by the pit bull that he never caught. I don't really know. I'll be honest. This is one instance where I don't really understand the significance.
Well, it's because we learn later that the pit bull.
We know the reason of it. He is a guardian of the dead, named Ned, ironically.
Ned the Dead.
Shouts to Ned the Dead. Also the name of a horror host that was in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Where I grew up in. Located in the Green Bay area. You can actually find like a whole bunch of his movies available on YouTube, actually.
Yeah. And because of that, we have put him on our horror channel. His co-host, Doc Moreau, unfortunately passed away pretty recently. But shout outs to this movie for making us think about Ned the Dead, host of the worst show in Wisconsin. We love you very much, buddy. So Ned takes him to a grave belonging to a Laura Tollins. And this is around when Jim becomes kind of this obsessed amateur detective, and he's like printing out a bunch of like newspaper articles about like obviously the number 23, but also about this dead girl.
Babe, please get to bed.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm looking into the number 23.
It's very obsessive, but it's also sort of, this is a weird thing where this is where the obsessiveness to me gets like creepy, but not acknowledged as creepy. You know, it becomes sort of a weird true crime podcast. Like, yeah, sure, babe, you're gonna be the one to solve the JonBenet Ramsey murder.
I think to an extent, it's meant to come across as like, you know, the wife is being supportive, but also doesn't. She's like, Jesus Christ, just fucking give it up.
Yeah, fair enough.
So she has enough scenes, and I feel like you are on her side, assuming that you aren't also you aren't Jim Carrey.
Yeah. And this is actually around where I discovered the Top Secrets thing, and it kind of clicked into my mind.
They reveal that Top Secrets
makes me
old
mad.
man. So before this, there's 2 pages at the back of the book that they find where there's a P.O. box. They go back to the P.O. box and they find the man. They find the man who gets who this is connected to. As soon as Top Secrets sees Jim Carrey's character, he fucking kills himself. That's not funny.
It's not funny, but it's a very abrupt way of putting it.
Well, but like he's like, you aren't supposed to be here.
Yeah.
He's completely freaked out, and Top Secrets, instead of revealing anything to him, just completely kills himself. Probably one of the most one of the craziest moments in the story.
And I do really like that at this point, like, you can kind of tell that Jim's like coming to all these like weird conclusions that are probably not correct, but he's just so deep that he can't even admit it to himself. And I just think that's really interesting.
Through Top Secrets, they managed to find that this one mental hospital is sort of an important place to look. So they have the wife check it out while, you know, Jim and his son go to Casanova's Park.
Yeah, this whole family kind of just buys into his theory, which is a little...
It's less buying into, I think, and more like, well, you know, we got to like save our husband. We got to save the dad.
It's like when you have a song stuck in your head and you have to listen to it 10 times in a row to get it out.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of it that's like they are entertaining him.
Okay.
But you know, but they go to Casanova's Park because they circle every 23rd word on every 23rd page, which seems to let them in on like a certain coordinates to an area. This is probably the most ridiculous part of the movie.
It's pretty silly.
Like we get to this point only because of like a sheer number of coincidences that are all happening right now. Oh, there are 2 pages that were stuck together this whole time. Oh, I just decided, what if I circled every 23rd word on every 23rd page? And crazy enough, Jim actually did mention that he did do this with the actual script. But it was extremely weird to get this story like this. I think this is maybe the reason that everybody says this movie is pretty stupid on the script.
Yeah.
Because there is no actual idea of how they get to point A to point B. It's just, you know, the characters figure, why don't we try this?
Yeah. And it is pretty dang goofy. This is not a code, you know? I mean, it is a code, but this isn't a clever code.
So they dig at Casanova's Park, and what do they find but a skull?
Mm-hmm.
So they get the police. They go to, as soon as they get the police, they go back, and the skull and the skeleton that was attached to it just completely disappears.
And that's when we get a very good line of, skeletons can't just get up and walk away. Which, I've seen the skull of Marquis de Sade. I know that they can float. You can't fool me, the number 23.
Listen, are we close to October? Maybe they can.
I think that skeletons can walk away if they try really hard.
Believe in you. Next part here, I'm going to say if you have any interest in seeing this movie and figuring out this mystery for yourself at this point, stop right here, right now on this episode. For the next time, we'll be doing episodes on Stephen King adaptations. That's going to be our next major arc. But the rest of this episode, we are going to get into heavy spoiler territory.
I'll try and put timestamps as well in the description once this goes up of where to skip to if you just want to kind of hear our final thoughts on the film.
Okay. So, as Walter gets home, he makes a few extra connections. He realizes that during the Suicide Blonde part, there's a reference to Pink, which Walter realizes that was Agatha's maiden name. Before Sparrow.
Yep.
It's one of those things that only gets revealed, like, right here, right now. And then as soon as he's like, Pink, he's like, hold up.
That was my wife's name.
How many people are named Pink? Why would there be a reference to the color pink in this story?
I'm married to Steve Buscemi.
Very, very strange. But because of this, Walter says, oh, Agatha must have written the book. And now we get the reveal. Walter wrote the book.
Apparently. Okay, but I just want to say, real funny, as he's like confronting Agatha about the book, his son, on multiple occasions, just kind of walks into the scene just in time to overhear something. This is the most convenient kid. He's just like, hey guys, what are you talking about? Dad murdered someone? That's crazy!
He needs a laugh track.
That's how it feels.
The Cousin Oliver kid. But yeah, no, like my biggest problem with this, oh my god, was this not the most obvious fucking reveal?
This movie goes crazy at this point. I have in my notes, I haven't seen a saxophone this murderous since Lost Highway, and I don't understand the logistics of the reveal. But they go to the room 23 and tear away that book cover wallpaper to reveal the 23rd chapter.
And you know what? It's filmed brilliantly.
Oh yeah, filmed incredibly.
This whole scene, everything up to this point, acted very well. The mystery in the script and the writing is the big thing that's holding this story back from being what it could be.
Yeah.
I think that this was the part where I just kind of sighed because there's a certain movie I don't think you have seen, and I don't ever want to spoil it for anybody, but it came out around this time frame. It was a Stephen King story, and it has an extremely similar reveal to this. And all I have to say is, you can't do that. It's kind of like if in 2000 I made a movie with the exact same kind of I see dead people type of reveal. I guess that's Fight Club. But no, but like I you can't do this whole reveal again, because once somebody has gotten this over on you, and this is like the general time frame, I think your mind is going to think back to this. It's very much like a Billy and the Clonosaurus situation.
Yeah, like, you can have the same twist in multiple pieces of media. Mysteries are based on the same general pieces of work, and it's all in the execution. But when you have two movies coming out similarly with a similar twist, doing the same kind of, like, way they've done it, it's just like, oh, okay. It reminds me, how can I say this without spoiling? There is a twist in Ace Attorney 6 that when it hits, I was like, oh yeah, I've played 999, which did this significantly better. You can't do that when you have these two pieces of media, and it is logical that these two pieces of media are so closely related. I think people who played Zero Escape will have played Ace Attorney. And in fact, I am one of them. You are one of them. Our friends are some of them. You can't do it. They're both, puzzle, mystery, visual novel hybrids. It makes sense that someone who has played Zero Escape will have played Ace Attorney 6 or vice versa. So when you have the same fucking twist in both games, you can't help but mentally compare them. And if one of them does it worse, you're immediately going to be like, well, this sucks. Even though it doesn't suck, but it kind of sucks.
Yeah, they say don't reference a better movie in the name, in the middle of your crappy movie. I'm not saying that the number 23 is crappy or that this counts as a reference, but I am going to say you don't want to make people think of like another movie's twist while you're doing your twist.
Yeah.
You need to at least do a little bit more to kind of differentiate yourself. And unfortunately, I don't feel as if the number 23 did that.
Yes.
But that's all to say. Where we can redeem Joel, he is not at fault for this.
Yeah, no, this isn't his fault. Again, it's shot well, acted well. It should have been awesome, but the script is stupid.
And that's not even to say this movie is bad. I think the way this movie wraps up, it does become better. But this is absolutely the low point of the film for me.
Yeah.
Is, when you build a film around a mystery, and the mystery is just kind of like a stupid reveal, then I think that there is obvious cracks in the foundation, and that's why, truth be told, I can't rate this any higher than just kind of like a middle-of-the-road kind of story. It is one of those big kind of drop-the-ball kind of situations where 10 minutes or 15 minutes can ruin a film for you sometimes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, that's not to say that there are bad things about even this reveal or even anything after it. So, like, for example, the idea that Walter's house is so bland because his real room is room 23 in this hotel, which is just covered in these scribbles. That's a cool idea. Like, you're basically seeing the fake house and you're realizing that, the reason he doesn't really do anything in his house is because, his wife makes the decisions because he doesn't really have a personality because a huge chunk of his personality was repressed with this book.
So, I think if there's one thing we should probably do, let's just explain the mystery here.
Yeah,
so that we can give this in full detail. We're kind of like going into like why this sucks. Let's actually let you guys kind of hear about this, make your own sort of judgments on it.
Absolutely. Take it away.
So, he got a note from a woman that he had a crush on. By circling the 23rd letter of this one note that he got from this woman, that is to say, the one from earlier,
Laura Tollins.
It read out, "Kill her." He confronts Laura, and in the process of it, he ends up actually murdering her.
With a saxophone.
Yes. And this is about... he didn't know how to respond to it. He ended up writing a novel that was secretly a long suicide note where he changed around the names and then left the 23rd chapter on the wall of this one hotel.
And I guess he must have wallpapered it up himself.
No, they say that the hotel did that for some reason.
Oh. Well,
they probably didn't look into it. They were like,
man, this guy left his crappy papers on the wall.
Oh, and it's weird because he did jump out the hotel window.
Oh, and we do see Walter's mangled body, which looks disgusting.
Yeah,
the flashback's interesting, at least.
So Dr. Leary, who works at the mental asylum, is the person who eventually found the papers for this. And decided to publish it as a novel.
Which is ridiculous because, yes, the book is hardbound, but doesn't resemble any novel I know.
It feels like this doesn't feel like it was the solution. It's so fucking weird.
Yeah, like, it's bizarre. If it was like, again, if it was a thrift store book or a self-bound novel, I would get it. Or like in a journal, but it's not.
Publishing this novel seemed to have driven Leary insane, which is exactly like why he kills himself once he sees this person who made this number 23 novel again.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, Topsy Kretz is the pseudonym of Leary, who is like publishing this book because originally it actually says by Walter Sparrow, but he, in a hilarious moment, I guess they find the manuscript and it's like taped over. Instead of just like reprinting the cover page, they just tape over Walter Sparrow with Topsy Kretz.
And right as we see the scene, right as Walter walks out of this mental hospital for the first time, as he's walking out, he immediately bumps into Agatha, which is how they met for the first time. But also, you get finally the reflection of why the apartment looks so barren. It's because he had a mind that was essentially wiped clean. That's why the apartment is so clean, basically.
Yeah. It's a great bit of visual storytelling from Joel. Like, it's cool. You know, he does not have a personality of his own. It's all Agatha, which is why she chose the color. And that's kind of cool, you know. It's fine, you know, nothing wrong with that. And it's kind of neat going through his flashback and seeing all these characters we've met up until this point kind of featuring in his past. But it's also really silly.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it. It's just silly.
But, you know, the weird part is, for as terrible as these moments are, you know, this could have been a lot worse, but I want to give full credit. Joel, somehow, some way, manages to tie up all this stupidity into a final couple of minutes, like a finale to this that I think does a decent job of sort of wrapping up the good elements of this. We get Agatha as she catches up with Walter, who has just figured out like his whole story here.
Right.
We get this whole talk about how, you know, he's hurting himself in the process. This is essentially a story about getting too much into your own head, finding too many connections. It's about feeling like there's no hope left for you at this point.
Yeah.
So he's genuinely very sorry of everything he has accused Agatha of and everything that he has ever done.
Which is, you know, kill his old girlfriend.
There's a lot of atonement here, and she, you know, in spite of everything, Agatha, she is willing to work with him. So she met the man that was past this story, who doesn't even remember anything that had happened because he got brain damage from jumping out of this apartment.
Yeah. And the dog remembers.
Yes. Yeah, he almost goes to commit suicide.
Oh yeah, it's the perfect Blue ending.
Yeah, by letting himself get hit by a number 23 bus.
Yeah.
It looks like. Before realizing, before getting out of the way.
Yeah. It is funny because it really is, it's a number 23 bus. There are 23 stops in the route. And it really is just the perfect blue shot of him in front of the approaching headlights, which is very funny.
But here's where they state what the purpose of the movie is.
Right.
They talk about how this film, and like I could see it here, is how you need to stop believing in destiny and set a path. Really, at the end, all the number 23 is just a number.
Yeah. And there's a Bible verse at the end.
Yes, it's be sure your sin will find you out. Numbers 32:23.
That's pretty funny.
And you know what? I looked into it. Technically, the line is, but if you fail to do this, you'll be sinning against the Lord. and you may be sure that your sin will find you out. But, close enough.
Yeah, close enough. I'm sure there's a translation out there somewhere. I bet he got 23 years in prison.
Probably. They don't directly say
it. But, that was the number 23. And let's talk about our overall thoughts.
Honestly, I don't want to say I didn't love this at all.
Yeah, it's not great.
I kind of liked it. I think that this would be an okay rental.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is a movie that I think is failed by its script. It's built around a central mystery that is very goofy, that I don't think works, and is poorly handled.
There's a lot of heart and personality in this. Describing this sounds like the stupidest shit in the world.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But, if you're actually watching this in practice, kind of works a little more than we might be making it out to be.
Yeah, emotionally, I think the big issue is that a lot of its big moments are unearned. But none of this is Joel's fault. His direction is excellent. Jim Carrey is a very good actor. There are scenes where I was super into it. Honestly, I was thinking like, oh man, we might end up becoming the number 23 apologists, but no, we aren't. I think I'm safe to say that no, I am not. But I don't hate it. And I think that there are a lot of people that are very uncharitable towards this movie. A little, unfortunately. I would not recommend this as one to seek out unless, you're being a completionist for, Jim Carrey or Joel or whoever is involved. But there are positives here, and there's enough to take from here that I think are worth taking.
There's part of me that thinks, had somebody taken this basic idea and reworked the script with the screenwriter, who, let's hope that they would have been a little more tolerant of this stuff, things would have worked out. Technically, we mentioned this story came out in that this movie was being worked on since 2002. The movie in question that I am referring to that had a similar twist, that came out in between the announcement of the number 23 and when it had actually released. So,
right.
There's a part of me that thinks maybe this was a case where this one thing came about that just fucked up everything.
Yeah.
But, it is technically still based on a story by Stephen King that was published at least a decade beforehand.
Yeah, so you can't kind of do this. But if this movie did one thing very well for me, it was reaffirm to myself that I do love me some grimy little noir mysteries.
Yeah.
Like there's always going to be an appeal there whenever you're like, hey, here's a mystery, and it's going to be shot really beautifully, and it's going to have a guy talking in a deep voice and saying, I went through the alleyway and there was the suicide blonde and it was a rainy night.
If there's one thing I'm shocked about, I was always under the impression, before we started this arc,
yeah, I
was fully expecting myself to hate this one.
Yeah.
I was also fully expecting myself to not like St. Elmo's Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I liked Batman Forever a lot. I didn't really have so much of... I didn't love it. It was never my favorite one like Returns is.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't like I was ready to defend it, but not to the same level that I didn't expect to love it as much as I did on rewatch.
Absolutely.
And that is just one thing that has shocked me through all this is you see Joel's heart and soul poured into every single one of these movies.
Absolutely.
It really just reaffirmed to me that even in his quote unquote crappier projects,
yeah,
there's a lot more to like. Even, I'm going to say Batman and Robin, I loved it as a kid.
Yeah, I loved it as a kid.
And that's why I'm never going to have the same... I'm not going to be able to be critical about that one as much as everyone else is.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it really goes to show that I do think Joel knew what he was talking about. I do think that Joel had a very impressive grasp on Hollywood, more than anyone will ever really appreciate. I don't care for Michael Bay. I don't care for Zack Snyder, who, those are two people also accused of being more style than substance. But to me, I just think Joel understood what made a good movie and just wanted to present it to the world.
If this entire arc really showed me one thing, it is that movies by a creator who, they aren't made in a vacuum.
No.
And if you have a creator who knows what they're doing and has a vision, you will find things to love in even the most maligned films. I think that there are plenty of people out there who are basically like movie for hire kind of guys, but Joel Schumacher was an artist with an artist's touch, and you can really see that artist's touch coming out in all of his movies. And I think in general, if this showed me one thing, it's that movies deserve to be given a chance. And it's the same thing that I felt with Chris Farley's films as well, and looking at Chris Farley's evolution throughout the years. And I think that's kind of something that I've really enjoyed about this podcast so far in general, is when you really dig deep and try and understand the people behind these movies, even if we're only looking at a small portion of it, you really start to kind of see the fingerprints of people working on these movies throughout the entire kind of arc. And it really is about finding those connections. And even something like St. Elmo's Fire, the number 23, you will find Joel's spirit in those movies in surprising ways. And if there's one thing I want to ask, anyone listening, is like, give movies a chance, man. All of them, even if you don't think you'll like them, even if you don't like them. Just try and you don't have to like movies. You don't have to like every movie. Maybe the number 23 is the worst movie you've seen in your whole life, and it makes you irrationally angry just to hear us talk positively about it. That's fine. But I think that the world of movies is a beautiful, varied thing, and there's all kinds of stuff you can pluck out. Just dig a little deeper. You'll find a lot of things to appreciate in all art if you just let yourself breathe and give it a little time to turn around in your head,
I have an assignment for you. This is film teacher Mandy here. Go to the streaming service of your choice. Maybe it's Tubi, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Search through the films. If there's any film to you that doesn't seem boring, but you're not sure if you're going to love it, and you're looking at the runtime and you can think to yourself, I can spare that, give it a shot. Worst case scenario, if you like the ideas in it, if there was something that drew you to it, what is it? Like, feel free to express that to the world. Like, why was I drawn to this one? What could this have been done better? There's one thing that I always say, and that's that you don't need to watch the classics to be a film expert. I think in order to be a film expert, you just need to watch movies and then think about it.
Absolutely. It's that simple, just the world of movies. It's a beautiful, varied place. There's no canonical list of movies you absolutely have to watch. Just watch some movies. Think about them. Have fun.
And it doesn't even have to be movies. However you want to engage with media. Video games.
Mm-hmm.
TV shows.
Find
books.
something that means something to you.
Yes. Whatever means something to you. Movies may be that thing for us. Might be other people. For other people, it might be other things. And I think that's totally okay. Just,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to really unpack with these arcs. And for Schumacher, for me personally, I got to see the story of a guy who was able to bring what he already knew in the terms of like fashion. And then he got to tell these amazing stories because I think Joel didn't feel discouraged by any sort of bad reviews
Mm-hmm.
from telling the stories that he wanted to tell. And I feel like had he lived for another 80 years, we would have seen movies every year.
We would have had another 80 Joel Schumacher movies to
Yes.
enjoy. Well, that does it for our Joel Schumacher arc. And we've mentioned it earlier. We're mentioning it again. We are going to... The thing is, when we started this podcast, we talk a lot about like what we were doing. We talk about actors, directors, and concepts. So our next thing we're going to be tackling for our next arc is, in fact, a concept. And we'll be revealing the full list of episodes we plan to do when we tackle our next concept, the idea of Stephen King adaptations.
Not Stephen King, the writer.
Yeah.
Not Stephen King, the director. That might eventually be in the pipelines one day.
Yeah, where we're
just
not
gonna be
talking
doing-
about his cameos in film. We are talking about what are the connections between how people choose to adapt Stephen King's writings into the world of film, because you'll find there are some shocking connections, and I'm sure there are plenty that we haven't even considered. So I'm really excited for that. I think it's going to be really unique. What I want you to do is check out armbarstudios.com for more information. We're going to put that news post up at some point in the near future. And of course, as usual, you can subscribe to us here on Spotify and on YouTube. On YouTube, it's Armbar Studios. And this has been Aaron. This has been Mandy. Our collective name is EMN. And I have some bad news.
What is it?
So, if you take EMN and you go into the alphabet,
Oh, no.
and let me see, E is the 5th letter of the alphabet, M is the 13th letter of the alphabet, N is the 14th letter of the alphabet. And if you add all of that up, you get 32. And what is 32 backwards? It's 23. We're ruined.
This is it. All right, final episode of the podcast.
Sorry, everyone, we're canceled. Okay. But yeah, follow us, Letterboxd. Mandy is MB Witch.
Yep.
I am Hard Luck Aaron. And until next time...
1, 2, 3, roll credits.
Hey, everybody. Well, welcome to Chiller Theater. I'm Not the Dead. Dr. Moreau is here. How are you, Doc?
I am functioning within normal parameters.
Dr. Moreau is a simple man. Simple pleasures rule his life.
Roll Credits is produced by Armbar Studios and is part of the Aaron and Mandy Network. The intro and outro music is provided by Daniel Vodovos, available on Bandcamp. For more information on all of our projects, visit armbarstudios.com.